In a letter to Rupert and Lachlan Murdoch, Fox CEO Suzanne Scott, and Fox President Jay Wallace, New York Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer says he urges Fox News to, quote, immediately cease the reckless amplification of the so-called Great Replacement theory.
He said in the letter, proponents of this white nationalist far-right conspiracy theory believe that a complicit or cooperative class of elites are advancing a plot designed to undermine the political power and culture of white Americans. However, this theory, which Schumer said has no basis in fact, has been injected into the mainstream thanks in large part to a dangerous level of amplification by the Fox network and its anchors. And what I don't like about this is that politicians should not be telling the media what they're allowed to talk about. I'm uncomfortable with the kinds of, there have been Democratic legislators doing, this is not the most egregious version of this, but Democratic legislators, sending letters to cable companies being like, why do you even carry Fox News? You're promoting misinformation and you could be liable or something. It's a kind of veering into First Amendment territory for me. Obviously, he has the right to speak his mind and to criticize and condemn the network. But when you are the political figure and you have the power to, tweak or change or have investigations or do things that's going to hurt a private media company, it starts to get a little dicey.
Yeah, I got to think about this a little bit because, look, I don't know that I want to say that if an elected official sees something that they think is wrong, and not just wrong, but pretty morally suspect, they're not allowed to say, hey, I think it's not a great idea for you to be spreading what is ultimately a racist theory. And we can talk more about the specifics of the different shades of replacement theory in my radar. But what is ultimately a racist theory on the television screen. Chuck Schumer saying, hey, don't be racist on TV, I don't think would be that controversial. And the reason that it feels controversial is because Great Replacement theory is something that is talked about in the context of Fox News in a relatively race-neutral way, right? They're very careful not to say it's about getting rid of any given race in a way, I think that if they did, they would get laughed off of the stage. They say things that are largely coterminous with what Democrats have been saying for years, which is that immigration and the browning of America is going to advantage Democratic politics at the polls. And so part of my hesitation is that Chuck Schumer has to, I think, look a little bit in the mirror about the Democratic Party's own messaging to figure out how to best push back meaningfully against what's being said on Fox News. I think just proclaiming that they shouldn't talk about it anymore, one, isn't going to change anything or have any coercive effect or make anything different. And two, does set them up to be accused of being kind of anti-speech scolds.
Right. So I think there's nothing. Obviously, he can say, don't be racist on TV. I think it's somewhat different to send a letter to the boss, to call the manager, to go like full Karen on the situation. When you are the legislator, I mean, ideally, I don't want my legislators doing anything or saying anything or even existing in the first place. But it's an effort to punish private speech that you don't like, which is not what the government is allowed to do.
Well, one thing I was thinking about is that sometimes one might say, well, if there's a market solution, if there's market pressures, if the advertisers withdraw because the consumers don't want it, then that's a more organic way for things to happen. But what has happened with Tucker Carlson specifically over at Fox, and if you read that 20,000 word New York Times piece, they talk about this, at times when advertisers have withdrawn, kind of an anti-market support has come in the form of the My Pizza guy or other big donors who will carry the program. My pillow, sorry. What did I say? My Pizza?
My Pizza.
Sorry.
Where's my pizza?
all comfort items. The My Pillow guy swept in and basically buoyed the show until the advertisers felt safe enough to return. So it's the forces at work here are not what's typical, and I don't know, absent a market solution, that there is an alternative. But I would presume that if the public did organically say we're going to withdraw the support, that's a kind of pressure that you would
That's absolutely fine. I was thinking specifically of, I just found it. This is an article I wrote a while ago. Anna Eshoo, who's a Democrat from California, I believe, and Jerry McNerney had sent a letter to cable providers, Roku, Amazon, Apple, as well, saying, what are the moral and ethical principles behind what kind of content you have? And are you, how do you decide what's disinformation? That starts to get into, you don't get to tell the company what kind of speech it has. That's the clearest, most litigated, and most defended and protected right we all have the first one, that you can't do that kind of thing.
Right. And they can ignore Chuck Schumer. If Chuck Schumer had some authority to actually control what was on the program, I'd be a lot more concerned, I think.
All right, we'll be back with more Rising in just a minute.